My new home. I repeat these words to myself, trying to get used to them. Andrew's house is a massive mansion with high ceilings, wooden beams, and windows overlooking endless green hills. Everything here seems so grand and a little intimidating. Andrew and I recently got married, and now I'm here to start a new life. Andrew is an elegant and attractive man of 50. His confidence and manners immediately caught my attention when we met. He is a widower and lives with his adult stepson, Leo. This morning, I met Leo for the first time in the hallway. He evokes mixed feelings in me. He's 28, almost my age, which makes our acquaintance even more awkward. When I entered the house, Leo looked at me intently, as if studying every feature of my face. There was something in his gaze that made me feel uneasy. He didn't look at me like a new wife to his stepfather, but more like a woman. His eyes lingered on me longer than they should have, and there was a slight smile on his face. Maybe I just imagined it? I'm not sure. Andrew didn't seem to notice anything unusual. He was just glad I had finally moved in and did everything possible to make me feel comfortable. We discussed our plans for the future, talked about how we would live here, and how important it was to establish a good relationship with Leo. He assured me that Leo was a good guy. He just needed time to get used to a new person in the house. But I feel it's not just about time. When I look at Leo, I see something else. His attention toward me doesn't feel like a stepson's attention to a new stepmother. It's too insistent, too tense. Maybe I'm just being overly sensitive? This evening, when Andrew went to his study, I stayed in the living room alone. Leo appeared in the doorway. His gaze was insistent and piercing. He came closer to me than necessary. "I'm glad you're living with us now, Anna," he said. "It will be interesting." His words had an unclear undertone. I smiled tightly, not knowing how to react. It seems that our new life will be much more complicated than I expected. I try to adjust to my new life in Andrew's house. Every morning starts with a slight feeling of anxiety. What will today bring? Leo seems to avoid my company. When I enter the kitchen, he steps out into the garden. When I find him in the living room, he retreats to his room. It's strange behavior, as if he doesn't want to talk to me or is deliberately avoiding me. I try to find a way to connect with him. I ask about his interests, hobbies, and plans for the future. But his answers are short and evasive. He hardly looks me in the eyes, as if afraid I might see something in his gaze. One evening, when Andrew was once again late at work, I decided we needed a more open conversation. I approached Leo in the living room, where he was immersed in a book. "Leo," I began softly, "I understand that the situation is not easy for either of us. We are, in essence, just getting to know each other, but I'd like for us to have a good relationship. We are a family, after all." Leo lifted his gaze from the book and looked at me. His eyes sparkled with something provocative. "I understand, Anna," he said. "It's just hard to get used to such beautiful company." I was taken aback. His words were laced with such obvious irony that I didn't know how to respond. I tried to smile and, to ease the tension, said, "Beautiful company? Leo, I'm your stepmother." He smirked slightly and took a step closer. "The problem is, I don't see you as a stepmother," he said quietly. "I see you as a beautiful, intelligent woman." I felt my cheeks flush. This was unexpected. There was no awkwardness in his voice. On the contrary, his words were bold and confident. I couldn't allow myself to show that his flirting elicited any reaction from me. "That's inappropriate, Leo," I said, trying to remain calm. "We're family, and I'd like us to act accordingly." He merely shrugged, his eyes still fixed on me. "I'm just saying what I think," he replied calmly. You don't have to react to it, but I'm afraid I can't force myself to see you as a stepmother. I'm sorry if that makes you uncomfortable." I tried to change the subject, pretending that nothing out of the ordinary had happened, but his words lingered in my mind. I told myself it was just youthful audacity, a test of my boundaries. Yet something in his gaze, in his tone, made me feel uneasy. When Andrew left for his business trip, I felt a slight unease. The house became too quiet, as if something important had left with him, something that held this world in balance. Now it was just Leo and me. Leo seemed to sense my uncertainty. He started appearing more often in places where I was, as if deliberately seeking my company. I tried to keep my distance, tried to behave as if nothing was happening, but his attention toward me was becoming more persistent. One evening, as I was reading a book in the living room, he came closer than usual. I felt his presence even before I heard his footsteps. Leo sat down next to me, his gaze piercing. "Anna," he began, not taking his eyes off me, "we need to talk." I sighed, trying not to reveal my tension. "About what, Leo?" "About us," he replied, his voice steady and calm. "I can't ignore that there's something special between us." I felt my heart begin to race. "Leo, we are family," I said firmly, trying to stay calm. "You shouldn't be saying things like that." "But why not?" Leo smiled, his eyes full of boldness. "We are almost the same age. We have common interests. We both feel this tension between us. Why not use it to our advantage?" I froze, unable to believe my ears. You're suggesting that we start something behind Andrew's back?" My voice trembled. "Exactly," he confirmed, his smile widening. "Secretly satisfy each other's desires." I stood up, feeling the blood rush to my face. "That's impossible, Leo. I'm not even going to discuss such things. I will pretend this conversation never happened, and I demand that you never say anything like this again." My words came out sharp, like a slap. Leo didn't move. He just kept looking at me with the same audacious smile. "All right, Anna, as you wish," he replied calmly. "But you know I'm right." With those words, he stood up and left the room, leaving me utterly confused. I felt something inside me tremble with anger and bewilderment. How could he so calmly suggest something like that? How dare he think I could even for a moment agree to this? But at the same time, I couldn't shake the strange feeling. The feeling that his words had somehow found an echo within me. The past few days have been a true test for me. Leo was not planning to back down. He kept insistently showing me attention, teasing, complimenting, and sometimes even allowing himself light, barely noticeable touches, fleeting and accidental, as if unintentional. But I knew it was deliberate. I felt trapped. His presence seemed to fill the space around me, and I could no longer remain indifferent. Every time he was near, my body tensed. I began to feel mixed emotions, an attraction and repulsion toward his behavior. It felt like a battle within myself. I tried to keep my distance, to avoid his touches and innuendos. But Leo was too persistent. He appeared when I least expected it and found any excuse to get closer. He smiled at me as if we were accomplices in some secret. His eyes sparkled with a mischievous light, like someone who knew something I couldn't understand. One day, while I was cooking dinner in the kitchen, Leo came up behind me and, seemingly accidentally, brushed against my hand as I reached for a knife. "Sorry," he said with a smile, but his voice was too soft, almost a whisper. "I didn't mean to startle you." My heart skipped a beat. That touch, simple and innocent at first glance, stirred something inside me. But I couldn't allow myself to give in to it. "It's okay," I replied stiffly, trying not to show how much it had affected me. But with every gesture, Every hint, my anxiety only grew. I realized I could no longer ignore what was happening. But how could I handle it? How could I maintain control when there was a constant battle inside me? I decided the best way out was to avoid him, but it seemed Leo already knew my every thought. He simply didn't give me a chance to step away. He joked, gave compliments that made me blush, even when I tried to act like I didn't care. "You're beautiful when you're angry," he said once, coming closer than necessary. "But even more so when you smile." I felt the blood rush to my cheeks. This was a game I didn't want to play, but it seemed he had already decided I would participate. Leo didn't give up. He kept finding new ways to be alone with me. One moment he would offer to help with the cleaning, another he would unexpectedly appear in the garden while I was watering the flowers, or come into the kitchen under the pretext of wanting to learn my dinner recipe. It was as if he was looking for any opportunity to be nearby, making me feel his presence every minute. "Let me help you," he would say every time I took on a task. I always refused, but he kept insisting, as if he didn't hear my objections. With each passing day, these random encounters became more frequent. His words were full of hints, subtle, yet so obvious. "We're so much alike," he said once, as we were arranging books on the shelf in the living room. "We love the same music, the same movies, and our ages are almost the same. It's not just a coincidence, don't you think?" I felt my heart skip a beat again. He was right. We were closer to each other in interests and outlooks than I was with Andrew. And that scared me. "I prefer not to think about such things," I replied dryly, trying to avert my gaze. "It's inappropriate." But Leo wouldn't relent. "You know, Anna, sometimes it feels like there's something more between us than just family ties. Have you ever thought about that?" I felt the tension growing inside me. I began to fear my feelings, started to realize that his presence caused not just anxiety, but a strange attraction as well. He was young, confident, bold, and despite all my determination to resist, I felt drawn to him. "No, Leo, I don't think about that," I replied, trying to sound firm, but my voice betrayed a tremor. "And neither should you." Leo just smiled back, a playful spark flickering in his eyes. "Maybe you just don't want to admit it to yourself?" Those words awakened an inner struggle within me. I couldn't allow myself to lose control. I couldn't allow myself to succumb to this temptation. But his confidence, his audacity, all of it made me feel uncertain. Every day became a new challenge for me. I realized that despite my attempts to resist, I was sinking deeper into this dangerous dance with Leo, and it frightened me that I was no longer sure if I wanted to leave this game. Andrew was supposed to return this evening. I was preparing dinner, trying to calm myself with thoughts that his return would bring a long-awaited sense of stability and peace to our home. I missed him, his confidence and calmness, his presence that always filled the house with warmth. But Leo seemed strangely excited. He didn't leave my side for a moment, finding every excuse to stay close. His eyes gleamed like those of a predator ready to pounce. I decided to go to bed early, certain that a quiet night would help me shake off all my worries. My eyelids were slowly closing when I heard the faint creak of the door. Someone entered the room. I was too tired to turn around and reassured myself that it was Andrew, returning home later than expected. I felt tension behind me, a sensation of warm breath on my neck. That familiar scent, woody, warm, deep, always reminded me of Andrew. He came closer, and my senses responded, longing for this moment. I had missed him, missed his touch. In that instant, I decided to give in to my feelings, surrender to the emotions, to spend this time in temptation. I closed my eyes and allowed myself to forget everything. I felt his hands gently touching my shoulder, his fingers gliding over my skin. It felt so much like Andrew, so familiar and comforting. I didn't turn around, enjoying the process. He had always been so tender when he returned after a long absence. His touches grew more insistent, and I allowed myself to drown in the moment, forgetting everything else. His lips touched my neck, and I shivered from the sudden rush of pleasure. But even though my body was responding, something in the back of my mind faintly whispered that something was off. But I didn't turn around. I wanted to savor this moment, to feel the closeness and warmth I had not felt in a long time. When I finally dared to open my eyes and turn around, my heart froze. In front of me stood Leo. His face was illuminated with triumph. His eyes glittered with a strange mix of passion and victory. I felt a cold horror pierce through my entire body. "Leo." My voice trembled, full of disbelief and fear. He smiled, not taking his eyes off me. "You wanted this too, Anna." His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Why are you so surprised?" I jumped out of bed, my heart pounding in my chest, and I was gasping for breath. All my fears and anxieties, all the warnings that had echoed in my mind for the past weeks, suddenly became reality. "Leo," I began, but my voice trembled. The words stuck in my throat, burning with anger and shame. "How could you? You did this on purpose, took advantage of the situation. You put on your father's cologne." My words burst out with the fury boiling inside me. Leo remained calm. He got up from the bed, his gaze focused and confident. "Anna, calm down," he said softly, his voice almost gentle. I couldn't hide my feelings any longer. "You wanted it too, otherwise you would have resisted. You know that." I felt my cheeks flush with a mix of anger and humiliation. "That was not what I wanted," I screamed, barely holding back tears. "You deceived me, used the moment to get what you wanted. How could you do that?" Leo didn't flinch. He stepped closer, his eyes calm and serene. "You can deny it all you want, Anna." His voice remained steady, without a hint of doubt. "But you didn't resist. You gave in to the moment, just like I did. Why can't you just admit it?" My thoughts were in turmoil. I felt like I was standing on the edge of an abyss. His words penetrated deep, making me doubt my actions, my feelings. How could he speak so calmly about what had happened? I got up from the bed, feeling a tremor take over my whole body. "Get out, Leo," I whispered, not recognizing my own voice. "Just leave." But Leo didn't move. His eyes remained fixed on me, full of confidence and some inexplicable sense of righteousness. The night had passed, but I hadn't slept a wink. Guilt, like a heavy stone, lay on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I sat in my room, staring into the darkness, not knowing how to deal with the terrible feeling that overwhelmed me. My thoughts swirled like a vortex, pulling me in different directions. I felt lost. How could I have let this happen? Why did I give in to my feelings? I remembered every touch, every breath, and it only deepened my confusion. "Leo." His words echoed in my mind. "You wanted this too, but I didn't want it. Or did I?" Leo tried to talk to me again in the morning. I was sitting in the kitchen, a cup of coffee in front of me, untouched. My hands were trembling, and I tried to steady them to avoid showing my weakness. "Anna." His voice was soft but insistent. "We can't ignore what's between us. It's something more." I looked up, my eyes full of exhaustion and pain. "Leo, I don't want to discuss this," I said quietly but firmly. "I need you to stay away. It was a mistake, a huge mistake." Leo stepped closer, his gaze steady and calm. "You can't deny it, Anna," he said. "There's a spark between us that we can't just ignore." I felt tears welling up, but I held them back. "Leo, please," I almost pleaded. "Stay away from me." He seemed about to say something, but at that moment, we heard the front door open. Andrew had returned home earlier than I expected. My heart clenched. I had to gather all my strength to hide what I was feeling. "Good morning," Andrew said, his voice cheerful, but there was something cautious in his eyes. He looked at us and immediately sensed that something was wrong. "Good morning, darling," I replied, trying to appear normal. "How was your trip?" I felt his eyes studying me, trying to figure out what was going on. My heart was pounding so loudly it seemed it could be heard across the room. Leo also remained calm, but I could see his gaze intently watching Andrew. "It went well," he replied, sitting down at the table. "But something feels off. You look tense, Anna." I smiled, trying to appear carefree. "Just didn't sleep well," I answered quickly. "Everything's fine." Andrew continued to study me, but seemed to decide not to ask any more questions. I knew he needed time to understand what was happening, but I also knew I wouldn't be able to hide my emotions for long. Andrew began to notice the changes. His glances became more attentive, his questions more frequent. It was as if he was studying both Leo and me, trying to find hidden clues in our words and gestures. I felt his suspicions growing with each passing day, and it filled me with dread. Leo, however, seemed to enjoy this new tension in the house. He continued to seek my gaze, joking as if nothing had happened, and deliberately found excuses to be near. I felt his attention becoming more insistent. It was as if he was trying to prove that there was something special between us, something that couldn't be ignored. Every time I was alone with Andrew, I felt my heart clench with fear. I tried to act normal, smile, talk about ordinary things, but inside, everything was boiling. I knew he felt something was wrong. He noticed how I flinched at his touch, how I avoided looking him in the eye. His gaze was full of questions for which I had no answers. One evening, when the three of us were sitting at dinner, I felt the atmosphere in the room growing more and more tense. Andrew put his fork down and looked at both of us intently. "Something's wrong," he said, his voice firm. "You both have been acting strange these past few days. What's going on?" My heart stopped. I tried not to show my panic, but it seemed my eyes had already given everything away. Leo, on the other hand, kept a calm expression and smiled as if it were all a joke. "Oh, Andrew, you're just being too suspicious," he said, smiling. "We're just a bit tired. Everything's fine." But I knew that answer wasn't enough for Andrew. He continued to look at me as if trying to peer deep into my soul to find the answer I was desperately trying to hide. A shadow of doubt appeared in his eyes, and I realized it was only a matter of time before he figured out the truth. Andrew began asking questions I couldn't avoid. He wanted to know why I had become so distant, why I didn't want to be close to him. Every time he asked, I felt the fear growing inside me. The tension in the house had become almost unbearable, as if everyone was waiting for the storm to finally break. I knew the secret was about to be revealed. I saw it in Andrew's eyes, heard it in every word he spoke, felt it in every move he made. And then I realized that staying in ignorance was no longer an option. All I could do was prepare for what was inevitably going to happen. The morning started with a heavy feeling. Leo was once again trying to find an opportunity to talk to me, and I knew this would lead to no good. We ended up alone in the living room, and I felt that we needed to somehow resolve this issue, but all my thoughts were tangled. "We have to forget what happened that night," I said quietly, trying not to look him in the eye. "It was a mistake. We can't go on like this. For the common good. For Andrew." Leo stepped closer, his voice calm, but I could feel his inner tension. "You know we can't just forget it, Anna. His words were too confident. But if that's what you want, fine. We'll pretend it never happened. I nodded, trying not to let my emotions surface. But at that moment, I noticed movement behind the door. Andrew was there. He had been listening. "What's going on here?" His voice broke the silence of the room, making me flinch. His face was pale, but his eyes blazed with anger. "What are you two discussing?" My heart started racing. I knew we had no way out. He had heard enough to start suspecting. "Andrew," I began, trying to keep calm. "It's not what you think." "Then explain it to me." He raised his voice, his face growing more severe. "What exactly should I think, Anna? What happened that night?" Leo looked at me, waiting for me to speak. I felt my hands start to tremble. Under his intense gaze, I had no choice. "Fine," I whispered, barely holding back tears. "I'll tell you the truth." I told him about that night, about how I made a mistake, thinking it was him, about how I gave in to my feelings and allowed what happened to happen. I tried to explain that it was a mistake, that I didn't want it to happen, but each word only fueled the anger in Andrew's eyes. "You're telling me you confused me with him?" His voice was filled with disbelief and rage. "How could you make such a mistake, Anna?" I didn't know what to say. Tears streamed down my cheeks, and I tried to reach out to him, but he recoiled. "Don't touch me," he growled, his voice trembling with fury. "Both of you. Leave. Immediately. Get out of my house." His order hit like a blow. I stood frozen, not knowing what to do. Leo put a hand on my shoulder and quietly said, "We'd better leave, Anna." I felt the world around me collapsing. I knew I had lost everything. Andrew's trust, my place in this house, my hope for the future. When Leo and I left Andrew's house, I felt completely shattered. Everything I had built in this life had collapsed in just a few moments. It seemed like I had lost everything: my marriage, my home, and my hope for the future. Leo walked beside me, silent and pensive, but I couldn't bear his presence. Everything that had happened felt wrong and unfair. I decided to go back to my parents. The house where I had grown up was the only place I could find some solace. But even there, I didn't feel safe. I realized that I had ruined my marriage, betrayed Andrew's trust, and now the future seemed like a terrifying unknown. Leo tried to support me. He called, he texted, he offered help. He said he understood how hard it was for me, that we both had made mistakes, and that we needed to stay together. But I rejected all his attempts. I didn't want his support because I knew it was because of him that all this happened. Yes, deep down I understood that I was also to blame, that I had allowed it to happen. But it didn't ease my sorrow. Every night I lay awake, thinking about what had happened. I replayed that night over and over in my head, trying to find the moment when everything went wrong. I blamed Leo, I blamed myself, I blamed my feelings, which in a single moment had proved stronger than me. I knew Andrew would never forgive me. I had seen his eyes, full of pain and disappointment, and I knew I could never return to my old life. I had destroyed everything I had, and now I was left alone with my mistakes and regrets. Leo didn't give up. He came by, tried to talk to me, but I asked him to leave. His presence only reminded me of that night, of the mistakes we had both made. I knew he didn't mean harm, that he was suffering too, but I couldn't allow myself to let him back into my life. "Anna," he said when I stood at the doorstep of my parents' house, "I know we both made mistakes, but we can try to start over, find a solution together." I looked at him, feeling the anger rising in my chest. "Do you think it's that simple?" I said, trembling with tension. "You ruined my life, Leo. You used me. You deceived me. How can I forgive you for that?" He tried to come closer. but I stepped back. "Please leave, Leo," I said, trying to stay calm. "I don't want to see you. Everything that happened is your fault, and maybe mine too, but I can't take it anymore." Leo fell silent, realizing that further words would be in vain. He left, leaving me alone, and I felt everything inside me breaking again. Left alone, I realized I needed to find a way to keep living despite everything that had happened. I felt pain and disappointment, but I knew I couldn't let those feelings consume me. I couldn't allow myself to drown in regret and self-blame. I spent weeks in solitude, reflecting on what had happened. I tried to understand where exactly I had gone wrong, how I had let things go so far. My thoughts kept returning to that night over and over. I blamed myself, blamed Leo, blamed my own weaknesses. But gradually, I began to see that I needed something more than just regret. One morning, I decided it was time to take a step toward my future, whatever it might hold. I picked up the phone and dialed Andrew's number. My heart was pounding so loudly, I feared he might hear it through the phone. I knew he might not answer, but I had to try. When he finally did, I felt a cold sweat run down my spine. "Andrew, it's me, Anna," I began, trying to sound confident, but my voice trembled. "I want to apologize. I know you're hurt, and I know I broke our trust. I'm not looking for excuses, just want to say that I'm sorry. Truly sorry." There was silence on the other end. I waited, feeling time slow to a crawl. Finally, I heard him take a deep breath. "Anna." His voice was cold but calm. "I've heard your words, but I think it's best for both of us to leave this in the past. We can't get back what we lost." His words pierced me, but I knew he was right. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. "I understand," I whispered. "Thank you for listening." He said goodbye, and the call ended. I felt tears welling up, but I held them back. It was necessary. I needed to hear those words to finally understand that our past was gone. From that day on, I decided to start over. I knew the mistakes I made didn't define me as a person. They just pointed to the path I still had to take. I chose to accept my mistakes and use them as an opportunity for growth and change. I began looking for a new job, new activities that could bring back my zest for life. I tried to look forward, not back. Every day became a small step toward a new version of myself, stronger and more confident. I realized that there were still many opportunities ahead. Life hadn't stopped. Yes, I made mistakes, and they cost me a lot, but that didn't mean I didn't have the right to a new beginning. I decided to forgive myself, to love life again,